We're going to be talking about Frankenstein. Specifically, we'll be using Guillermo del Toro's rendition of Frankenstein as our kind of leaping off point, at least from a cinematic standpoint, because he takes some different directions in how he portrays his characters, but it's really close to the actual source material, I would say. I think he just kind of takes a different approach to the symbolic level.
Compared to the standard corny versions of Frankenstein and all the weird modern renditions.
Yes. He's more true to the actual essence of what the book was trying to get at.
Right. It's definitely a return to the book.
One of the things that I found interesting too, like I was doing some research just on like the book prior to this to just give myself a foundation. And I found out that the book had a subtitle, at least Mary Shelley put it in there, but I think it was later dropped either by the publishers or just fell out of common knowledge. But it was like a modern Prometheus.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting.
Yeah, I was like, oh, that's so fascinating to see that, because as I saw that, and I think even in the story, he calls Frankenstein Prometheus, like harnessing lightning or electricity to create life. Yes. The doctor. So I don't know exactly, do we want to just start from the beginning of the story? Because I think it's actually pretty interesting, like kind of sets the stage for everything that follows.
Yeah.
Because I didn't actually know much about the beginning of the story, like the young life of
Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Sure. Take it where you want. Like much of my thinking is going to be
symbolic, right?
Symbolic and about the place in history that the book
represents
and what it says about us here now today.
We can start with where we'll just go chronological, because the story is kind of like autobiographical in some sense.
Mm-hmm.
But we can start with the early life of Victor Frankenstein, which it's one of those things that, because you hear so much about the monster, at least in pop culture, the man kind of gets overshadowed by the monster.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's kind of the least interesting part of this whole thing, in my opinion. But to kind of summarize the early life of Victor is he's got a father who's really intense, but really only cares about like status and like what his family name will get him, and is already a renowned surgeon in his own right. And so only cares about what his son might do to further his own legacy. And then on the other side of that perspective, he has his mother, who he's deeply connected with, like at an emotional level, which is not all that surprising as a young boy. Most children are. But one father who's pretty detached and kind of not really interested in being any more deeply connected. So
yeah,
it kind of sets up this rift early, but then obviously the mom dies. I believe it's childbirth for his brother. They don't really clearly say that, but I'm assuming that's what it is. Which then I think kind of is this through line of the whole story of like, it is an imprinting on the character symbolically of like, this is what happens to life. Like people can be ripped away from you too soon. And so then, because his dad is like this achievement driven person, he's driven to try to achieve in science as a surgeon to not only eclipse his dad, but then that plants the seed of like, okay, how do you chase this dream of stopping death? Like it's this obsession of beating death, I guess, or like having control over things that you arguably shouldn't be able to control, which might be leading. But I think it sets up the whole stage for what is to come. It's like a foreshadow, but it kind of happens fast, so it might not be clear to people as to like why that feels important. And I think in Del Toro, they do that like dream sequence where he has visions of like an angel or fiery angel in front of him, which I'm like, oh, this is really good from a symbolic level to kind of paint what he's being motivated by.
It's definitely, so we can talk about the historical context of this is Victorian.
Yeah, it'd be like 1800s.
Yeah,
late 1800s maybe.
Which is a notoriously stodgy period of history. It's the rise of modernism.
Okay.
And so what you have is an extremely optimistic view about rationality.
Okay.
And then man can be rational, and they can, through the work of their rational minds, overthrow the restricting shackles of superstition and religion and all the things of the past.
Okay, it's like throwing back like a rally against like the Dark Age, like superstitious mentality of Europe, This is
Yeah.
set in Europe, right? And
Frankenstein would be probably Germany,
actually, the name totally Germany. Did you say that?
which was a kind of bastion of learning during that era.
Oh yeah, center of science.
Huge.
Like if you didn't know German at that era, in that time period, you were not a serious scientist.
Yeah.
Even people in America at that time period had to learn German to be able to read the cutting edge papers of the day.
Great philosophers are coming out of there.
Mm-hmm. Neumann. Well, he's later, but
You have Hegel.
Yep.
You have all the Kant. This enormous center of learning is all happening in Germany. It's representative of the scientific mind. It's an underappreciated fact, probably, that Germany was still at the height of its
intellectual prowess.
right before the World Wars.
Yeah, it was the First World War, yeah.
How strange a thing it is that the most rational of all countries could go where it went.
It's crazy.
The most learned, the most barbaric.
Yeah.
Right. They became, they dehumanized, they really dehumanized themselves and others through perhaps this kind of extreme rationing. Or pushed too far, but
right.
It's all to paint the picture, right? You're getting a sense of the era. The era is before the World Wars, when Germany is intellectually at its peak and it's the center of learning in all of Europe. And there's all this optimism.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like it felt like a time of maybe infinite progress. Like as things are industrializing, like look at all like lifting people out of squalor and look at the lights, like illuminating the world, which is like illuminating consciousness, etc.
Yeah,
right. Because I'm using the steampunk vibes that we get in the later experiments, but I think it's all wrapped into
the Panama Canal and rerouting the Chicago River and all of these things.
Manifest Destiny, that's American, but still,
there's no end to this expansion.
Right, like if you can think an idea, you can
and there's no reason not to, right? Because the things that would hold you back and tell you not to are mere superstitions held by lunatics from a previous age.
Right. Math or the science can lead us to salvation.
It's really cool because it's downstream of the Enlightenment. Can I read the first?
Yeah, go for it.
So I really want to linger. I think it's my job in some sense here to not just explain the basic symbolism that emerges in the visuals of the film, but to give you a sense of where the idea of the film in the book comes from. Where's it's growing out of. And during the Enlightenment and before and after, there was a myth that's 500 years, the Enlightenment onwards, that led us to our time. So we're still in it. We're right at the end.
Scarily enough.
And it's really the myth of Faust.
Okay. The deal with the devil.
The idea is that there's a guy who's seeking knowledge, and to get ultimate knowledge, he makes a deal with the devil. And Goethe, a German author and scientist, writes 2 volumes of Faust, probably the most popular version of this. And he makes a deal with Mephistopheles. It's a whole epic poem, basically. But a lot of this is tied up with alchemy, and Newton wrote more about alchemy than he ever wrote about physics.
That's fascinating.
And a whole bunch of these early scientists were doing alchemy.
It's tangent, but it might be a fun tangent to research Newton, the alchemist, instead of Newton, the physicist.
Oh, I'm sure someone's written a book. I know I've listened to the audiobook.
Because that might be
The Myth of Disenchantment by Jason Ananda Josephson Storm or something. It's a very long name.
Yeah.
But The Myth of Disenchantment. I didn't finish the whole thing.
Yeah.
That guy's incredibly good at researching. Cool. Anyway, so I wanted to read just a short paragraph. This is from Jung talking about the central kind of idea of alchemy going on. So
what is the core philosophy of what the pursuit of alchemy
and this is coming out of European Christianity.
I was going to say, is alchemy would have to be before Christianity, or was it simultaneously?
Yeah, and there probably in the Middle Ages wasn't an issue with alchemy from the church's perspective.
Because
the church would have. Okay, so here's the quote. Now, all these myth pictures represent a drama of the human psyche on the further side of consciousness, showing man as both the one to be redeemed and the redeemer. The first formulation is Christian, the second alchemical. In the first case, man attributes the need of redemption to himself and leaves the work of redemption, the actual, I believe that the Greek word is nous or opus. It's probably just opus. I can't read the Greek. To the autonomous divine figure. So, pause. He's saying there that the Christians say that we human beings on our plane need to be redeemed, and it's God, or Christ the Redeemer, who redeems us. So Christ is above you, in between you and God, and the redemption trickles down to you. In the latter case, the alchemical case, man takes upon himself the duty of carrying out the redeeming opus and attributes the state of suffering and consequent need of redemption to the anima mundi, imprisoned in matter. Anima is soul, mundi is world, the world soul.
Oh.
Okay, so what you have there is an initial Christian idea, a frame for looking at the world and understanding things.
So it's a Christian frame,
as a starting point. Christian frame, something above us redeems us. We're above matter. We redeem matter. The spirit in matter, the world. It's this world soul is trapped in the material world. So it's another trickling down. That Christ redeems you.
It's kind of telling too that the suffering is the vehicle for which things are redeemed.
Go on.
Well, because the idea is that, if Christ suffered for our sins, then humanity's purpose is to toil at something, suffer, whatever suffering doesn't have to be as negative a connotation as it is used, as it meant in modern contexts. It just means because you could suffer with a purpose and it doesn't feel like pain, or it could even still be pain, but you have a reason to do it. And so that would mean that if you suffer with the right purpose, then you can redeem.
Okay, good.
At least by using the Christian framework, it means that it does have a purpose, I guess, inherently. Because why would you suffer for something if there was no reason to?
Yeah. Okay, so there's a split that seems to happen in that in the medieval world, man is a mediator between matter and spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of world of heaven and earth.
Right.
We sit right in between. In fact, that's a pattern that exists in every individual. There's a pattern of behavior or personality that isn't, it's your speech, it's everything that animates just the bare material facts. So in some sense, every person is a collection of matter, and what makes them a unique individual is the spirit that's overlaid on that matter. So in a person, you have both heaven and earth.
Right.
So you're a microcosm of the world, but you're also mediate between the spirits that motivate and organize and animate all groups of people even. And then through us, we work on the earth in service to some higher purpose. And in that way, we mediate the way in which heaven changes matter. So we're in between. But the alchemists are sort of picking up on that it's heaven, us as mediator, and earth. They say that it's our responsibility, even in imitation of Christ, to redeem what's beneath us, the man. Which seems to flip where this goes wrong is that if you cease believing in God in that circumstance, then the whole you changing matter for a purpose under which you serve is gone. There's no more purpose for serving in your manipulation of matter. The highest order is your will. And you take the place of Christ and you become the God figure manipulating the world. Mm-hmm. That's Luciferic. That's exactly what it's. My intellect is the highest thing. And I can change the world as I see fit. And so in the early stages of alchemy, where there might be a kind of unification of Christianity and alchemy, once God is removed from the picture, it snaps, and now you're free to do with the world anything that you wish. And you're getting intuition in Frankenstein of the consequences of that part.
Yeah. We can move on to the midlife part of the summary that I wrote for him, because I think it fits perfectly, right? Because it shows Victor, who's now an adult, probably mid.
I put one more piece
Yeah,
on
go for
that,
it.
on the early part of his life. So if I've just set up the stage for understanding kind of the historical basis that would lead to something like Frankenstein being written and this character coming to life and all these things, to zoom, ask a question about why is his family life in some sense
Important.
the way that it is? Why is it depicted the way? Why is this era seen the way that? That's also a consequence of the ascent of rationality associated with an intellect decoupled from a higher purpose.
Yeah.
And that the family can be engineered and everyone's rational, and all you're being controlled by your emotions is invalid. And that the mind is, as Descartes has taught us, the mind is separate from the body, and the body should be given to just be subordinated to the will. And there's no relationship
And
there. So
I think the dad, his father, like, is the spirit of the times. He emulates society as it should be of that period. Not that it's
in that titanic, tyrannical mind kills the feminine.
Yeah,
it kills the
right.
All this and interesting and implicit and irrational, unconscious features of experience have to be killed. They have to be.
There's no space for those things, especially for little boys.
There's no.
We don't need those emotions. Throw them out.
They are invalid in this worldview. They're invalid.
And so that leads us to the man Victor grows up to be. And so basically, his father's achievement-oriented, overbearing, doesn't really give a shit about how you feel about what it is that you're doing. It's like, he says you're learning to be a surgeon. And so Victor takes that as a challenge of like, okay, if my dad wants me to do this, then I'm going to be the best surgeon there ever was.
Okay, so he steps into the expectations of the time.
Yes.
So he's an exemplar of the era.
And then he goes a step further, though. He becomes eccentric, somewhat an outsider because of that eccentricity, and overly ambitious.
Right. The eccentricity, the outsiderness, is outside of the old way of the kind of moral state. They're appalled that he would play with life and death in this way, but he's taking the argument to his natural conclusion. It's okay if all that there is our will and matter is to be manipulated.
He's just taking the next logical leap before everyone else is comfortable for it.
Why not cut people apart and use cadavers to reconstruct a body?
And he's not afraid to like go to these gross places that are like someone of his status would be appalled at going to, like morgues or battlefields. And later on,
it's old superstitions that say you shouldn't do that.
I see.
It's the Christian sentiment that says you shouldn't be digging up these bodies and going to battlefields and taking people's. It's sacrilegious.
Yes.
It's terrible. But he's saying, what are you talking about? Right. Again, he's taking this worldview where it's naturally going to go.
Right. And then the other part of that I feel like it's interesting because he feels so purpose-filled, right? That he's this driven genius that the world just hasn't caught up with where he's going with his ideas or what he could achieve with science, right? As the best surgeon there ever was, if he learns the right esoteric knowledge, he'll be able to unlock the keys to life or death. Whatever way you want to look at it. I mean, I think you can look at it in both ways, life or death.
Still look at it as, why is it like death is just a failing of engineering?
Right.
It's faulty engineering. Why can't we just engineer the death right out of it?
Yes.
It's a flaw in our nature.
And so you basically get to this point where he's so purpose-driven, though, that he can't fully comprehend the direction he's going. Like, he can't see the grotesque parts of what he's trying to achieve. He's so driven by, I want to build this thing, where he can't step back and see what it is that he's actually building. And then you have a character who isn't, how do I describe it? Because he's not fully integrated in a symbolic sense, of course, things fall off the rails because he's topsy-turvy. Like, he's one-sided into this intellectual scientific rationality thing that I might be skipping too far ahead, but by the time he achieves success, he doesn't actually know what to do with the success. He's so excited about just building the thing, right? That when he actually gets to the other side of it, he doesn't know how to be a steward of the thing he created. And I think so many times you see this parallel of mad genius create thing that's transformed society, and then it crashes and burns, or they have to pass it off to someone else who figures out how to actually integrate it into the world. And so that's what I think turns this story from this Prometheus type story, but also it's a tragic story of someone who, when you look at the character level of their own failings, it's part of it's set up because of their upbringing, but also society failed them. And then the creature itself, which we'll probably elaborate further, is a mirror of Frankenstein.
He's certainly the consequence of the type of person that
Could create a thing. Like
they would try to do something.
Yeah, because in my head, like once the creature's created, he doesn't see it as in
It's a trickling down. Okay,
wherever you want to go.
where you see it in that a trickling down of the pattern of the father with Victor Frankenstein, trickling down to Frankenstein with the monster. It's that if the father is a representation of culture, right, embodying the spirit of this rational age, you understand that pure rationality without all of the implicit parts underneath it that actually undergird it and hold it up, being allowed, produces the kind of person who is nothing but this kind of rationality, who is narrowly focused, who can't see anything. He's got blinders on. Oh, the only thing he sees is this particular purpose that he's trying to fix.
Right.
And he can't see all the things like how grotesque it is to violate a person's body.
To stitch a bunch of people together because, oh, this is the perfect piece to use for this part.
How he doesn't take into account the will of those people.
Yes.
Like then before they died, it dehumanizes them and turns them into a base matter, a resource to be. It's just another natural resource. It's just a tree you can turn to lumber. Yeah, it's a human being that you turn into
spare parts.
The monster, right? Apparently. So it's a feature of this kind of cognition. Like Ian McGilchrist is talking about the differences in the hemispheres of the brain. Like that the left hemisphere is open and holistic.
Right, so this would be like right hemisphere with just everything is.
The left hemisphere is open and holistic and can see the implicit and has a greater emotional understanding and empathy and all these things. And the right hemisphere is narrow in its focus. It's object oriented. It's emotionally stunted. It only has the only lateralizing emotion that makes its way into the right hemisphere really primarily is anger.
Oh,
which you'd expect because if the right hemisphere is evolved for hunt and pursuit, where you have to have a narrow focus and draw a line from you to the objective, and you need to literally hunt that thing, the aggression is a piece of that hunting. It's part of the network.
No wonder the god of war is anger.
Yeah, and you have right. So you have anger lateralizing there, and then Victor, when he isn't getting to his objective, and the monster can't say anything other than Victor, instead of seeing that it's not a machine that you're trying to
program or whatever,
it's a living thing, he just gets angry and destroy eventually.
Yeah. Right. Because instead of thinking about it as a problem of like, oh, this is a being that is learning how to be conscious again, because he's coming in with a whole bunch of preconceptions.
He's thinking about it like a machine.
Right. Where instead of looking at it as like an evolving consciousness, like you just rebooted a being and it has nothing, even though it looks like an adult, like it's the size of an adult. Yeah. The assumption he's making is that it should already be pre-packaged with a bunch of behaviors. When in reality, as it's shown, is that it has to learn and grow. It's accelerated to some degree because using adult brains or something, it can learn. I'm filling in a lot of gaps here, but in speculating, the idea is that it can learn rapidly and use the full horsepower of a human brain to jumpstart itself, even just by observation.
It doesn't even need to give you that.
No, it doesn't.
Like Mary Shelley doesn't need to come up with some scientific explanation of why her monster is the way that it is. It doesn't matter.
It's all, but because it just makes sense intuitively.
It's a story.
Yeah, also that too.
She's trying to get to the spirit of this thing, the issue. What's at the heart of the issue here? And the issue is that you're seeing the entire world through a merely rationalistic lens, and rationality is relegated to well-defined problems. So this means, and a well-defined problem is one where you can know all the variables, have a definition for them, it's accurate, and then manipulate all of those things to arrive at the outcome that you want. But a human being is way too complicated to know everything about, to know all of the variables, to see how they all interact, to be able to even name them. There's so many unknown unknowns that the amount of information that's left out of the purview of pure rationality is ultimately, for this project, fatal. And that's the point she's in some sense trying to make. She's trying to get across.
So you have to disguise it in a tragedy and a horror story to get people to sit down and pay attention to like.
And apparently learn nothing because we're doing it already. We're
going to get to that. I want to save it toward the end because it really jumps into contemporary times. But I think there's a reason why this story resonates long term, because we just keep playing it out over and over again.
And I'm sure Guillermo del Toro is putting this out now for good reason.
Oh, yeah.
He's seeing what's happening. He's noticing the AI age. And he's like, oh, we're trying to create
Prometheus
a living...
is seeing fire again, but now it's in code.
Yeah, we're creating some kind of ersatz human being in the digital world using purely rationalistic means. And we think that this is going to go well. You're not paying attention to anything. Reason. Maybe it's strictly AI or maybe it's something more.
I think AI is the easiest parallel, but you could apply technology.
Anything that's reducing the world to pure rationality.
Yeah.
In a long historical trajectory.
Yeah.
To this is going like...
And ever since technology, because you could play this game with almost every story that plays with like crazy technology, like atomic bomb or whatever. There's always been this kind of looming specter of like, what if we fuck this up?
You will. It is an inevitability.
Well, because it's like always when you hear these platitudes or parables of like people will say like, oh, well, we got to keep relearning the same lessons over and over again. But the subtext of those kinds of things is like, but don't worry, I won't make that mistake. I will be the higher minded individual chased down the pipe dream that ends up being
you see where the Faustian
it's the Faustian bargain.
It's when you get to a place where it's all your will above everything, and there's no wills you believe yourself subject to.
That's why I'm like, this is put the AI rat race in a nutshell.
It is spectacularly arrogant and individualistic because it's not actually like may the best intellect win. It's me.
No, it's who wins, because who's imprinting on those things? Who's creating the system? It's obviously the companies, but it's the founders of those companies who want to stand atop the pile and say, look at it first.
Yeah. And you'll have, so this is something interesting. Okay. So interesting about the left hemisphere of the brain is it's a bullshitter. So if it doesn't have an answer, it won't say, I don't know.
It's a guess.
It'll make shit up.
Or just makes it up.
Where you'll have people with stroke on their right hemisphere or a lesion on their right hemisphere, so they can't use it. They can only rely on their left. They'll lose operation, I think it's of their left arm, and they won't even acknowledge it to them. And they'll be like, whose arm is that? And they'll be like, well, it's the other patient's arm.
Even though it's theirs?
Yes.
That's crazy.
That's their arm. Can you move your arm? I am moving my arm. They're not. So what it does is it has a frame of the world without a means of updating itself. It has to be updated from the right hemisphere. And what exists outside the frame, nothing exists outside the frame. And when you point out things that do, it creates a justification for that exists within the frame. It preserves the framework. So ideologues, political ideologues, there's a cool study that I read a while back that looked at people who weren't that politically committed and those who were very politically. And they want to know who was using heuristics more. A simple rule for getting through things.
It's a rule of thumb.
Yeah. Their theory was that ideologues would use heuristics more because they just want to justify their BS. Not true. Political moderates, people who aren't ideological, are more likely to use heuristics. And that seems to be because the ideologues spend all their time reinforcing what they already believe.
So you don't
Thinking,
so they just
it's all post hoc rationalizations justifying what they already know to be true. They reinforce.
right.
That's all they
They're
do.
just putting more layers on the shell.
Any question that comes their way, they can confabulate a justification for that. So if you say anything that points out something outside of their frame, they can, yes. Which if you meet people like this, you'll get it. You'll just notice something that's implicit and be like, yes, clearly that political party has problems with their media, that their media has been bullshitting for years, and that's a lie. And they'll do a what about, or they'll do some way to get around this. Oh, well, this is, you're reading the wrong section. You did a justification, and unable to just admit the simple fact that, like, yeah, your party has fucking problems. You promise, and they won't acknowledge them because it doesn't fit into their system. They're not willing to update it. That's what a political ideology.
It doesn't fit the program, so it doesn't even.
The rational system becomes total, and nothing exists outside the system. Anything that you suggest exists outside the system has to be explained away within the confines.
To summarize, that means gray zones, like ambiguity, right?
Fun.
Like existing within ambiguity can never, in this type of worldview or paradigm, you can never exist in it, which means it doesn't compute with reality.
No, it doesn't compute with reality.
Because reality is a bunch of gray zones where it's probability. It's like, what is the best action to take? And there really is no such thing as a 100% best action, because there's always errors or probabilities of failure, whatever you want to call it, right? Like,
reality is a intrinsically ill-defined problem.
Yeah.
There's no escaping that. And it's because there's multiple reasons for this. One is that it's because rationality is dependent on another system beneath it to bootstrap it. So they'll say it's another thing that McGilchrist I've heard through McGilchrist, is that psychiatrists who study schizophrenia will say that schizophrenics have lost everything but their rationality. And so their crazy paranoid thinking and all this is actually rationality. It is pure rationality. That's what happens when you get pure rationality. It's unable to update its system. It doesn't have that intuitive bullshit detector. It tells you, well, that's ridiculous, even if you don't have the time to go and explain the whole thing, because you need that. It reduces the noise in the world down to what's plausible. But when that intuitive sense of plausibility is annihilated, then everything is possible, including things that are so insane that when you and I hear them, we go like, you're mad. But they don't know that. They're trapped in pure rationality. It is dependent on the emotional systems beneath it, which are an implicit form of cognition. Right? It's like explaining a joke. If I explain the joke to you, it's not a joke anymore. Right? You have to leave some things implicit for them to even be what they are. The attempt to explicate them doesn't actually elaborate the joke and make it better. It makes it not a joke anymore. There are implicit things that have to be implicit, that are always going to be implicit, that rationality is dependent on. And so that's one piece. The rationality is dependent on irrational undergirding or foundations. That's one fatal flaw. The second fatal flaw is that you're limited. You're just limited. You just can't know everything. Period. Ever. You will die. Everything the human being learns in their entire lifetime is just a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Yes.
Especially even more true now than it ever has been.
Yes.
All right. Ever has been.
Ironically,
in a world where we're flooded by information.
All noise has led to more arrogance instead of humility.
Hilariously.
Of course.
Well, it's because we're running primitive software, modern technology that we would never evolve for.
We're running a bad philosophy.
Yeah.
We're running this Faustian philosophy. And I can know it all. And so you have Dave Smith going on, fucking Joe Rogan, and talking like he has an idea of what's happening. Is completely oblivious to everything he doesn't know and all the implicit things.
But he's done this research though.
Yeah, and of course people will memeified him getting. I'm only bringing this up not because of the politics or anything. I'm not making any statement about Israel or Palestine. I'm only bringing this up to show something about cognition. Will memeify and mock Douglas Murray in that conversation. Like, have you been to the blockade? Have you seen it for yourself? And he says no. And it's like, that's right, because you exist on a plane of pure explicated information, not experience. You're not turning to experience to inform your model of the world. You're content to reinforce this model you already had.
But what drives me crazy in that particular way of operating is that how can like doing research, like reading books or whatever, watching interviews about any topic, equate lived experience? Because what the positing of this type of worldview is that you don't actually have to be like boots on the ground. Like that's like saying, "Oh, I'm a marathoner," without ever running a marathon. And no one would ever and people are like, "Wow, yeah, how fast can you run?" And you say like 3:15. And it's like, wow, that's fast. But you've never actually done it. But people believe you like you did. What are we talking about?
It's like reading a manual of how to ride a bike and being like, I've done it.
Or put it together.
You can't, I don't care how much you read about riding a bike. You
just have to do shit.
You have to do it.
Why we're doing this? Because we were sick and tired of just talking. So we're doing it.
It's Mary in the black and white room.
Yeah. That's a really old
analogy that's about consciousness fundamentally. That you have Mary, who's a scientist, and she sits in a room that's all black and white for eternity. It's always will be. That's the only colors there. And she reads everything about color. Everything. She's an absolute how light refracts and reflects and how your eye works to absorb and condense these colors and all the very expensive neurological technology that produces an experience of the color. She knows all of this, but she's never seen color. There's a point at which the pure experience is necessary for understanding.
Right. I mean, even just to use an example of the last episodes we recorded, I've had to deal with so many more issues than I thought was possible to make this podcast interesting and easy to listen to. If I would have known all the work it was going to take, I probably wouldn't have did it. Exactly. I mean, that's kind of the point, right? Like, and I think that's like where some of this stuff is like, when you know too much, you get paralyzed from being able to actually take action.
Yeah, right.
Because then you freak out and you're like, well, I guess I'm not doing this. Because it sounds too daunting, or, oh, here's all, like, you can point at all the issues you're going to have. When in reality, you just got to have to roll up your sleeves and just
don't think.
You really just have to take a leap of faith.
Just do it.
You just got to thinking.
Which is another knock on rationality.
Yeah.
That actually to act, you have to, at a certain point, stop thinking. It's a system that doesn't work. It doesn't work. Flaw. And what's playing out in Frankenstein is this. This is what a kind of pure rationalist view of the world.
Right.
And it creates monsters.
Right. And when you kind of see that too, like after he creates the monster, he thinks that the experiment fails, but then it doesn't. And then his friends show up and then they realize what he did and they try to talk sense into him, but he won't see it. Right. To kind of pull this back into the story is they try to talk sense into him like, hey, this isn't just like an automaton. This is like a being of some kind that should be treated better than just being chained into the basement. And he's just like, nah. It doesn't.
It's not the ideal he was pursuing.
Yeah, created something, but it wasn't what he envisioned.
He never could have, because it was always going to be this thing within the logic of that world, trying to pull the lesson out of it. You see that it was always going to be what the monster was. But he understand that.
Which makes sense, because
it's what undermined his ideals. oh, that actually is your arm. You just had a stroke.
Well, yeah, because like I think it's telling to kind of go back to him losing his mother early in his life. He's banding with only one half of the tools available to.
Okay, so symbolically, right? So it's Mother Nature and Father Culture, and culture is what's known, right? It's what's mechanized, what's systemized, what's light. That the light can shine on. You can see it clearly. Mother Nature is implicit. It works in strange ways.
You can't really write a guidebook about it or whatever.
It's too
You
complicated.
have to just be in it, I guess.
Yeah. And it has a kind of will of its own.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with me, or almost nothing to do with me. If I plant a tree, I can water it, I can do so much, but I don't have to build the tree
itself.
It acts something else.
As long as it will flourish.
And it doesn't care about what you want. Doesn't care. So if I'm like, I don't want you to grow in my garden weeds, stop it. And I'll pull them out and they'll be there a week later. And then there'll be more of them that are spreading there. Nature is constantly a reminder that you're not in control here, that the world doesn't operate under your will.
I almost think the perspective of the creature is a kind of a mirror to this. Like with him observing the villagers trying to survive winter and him kind of helping in the shadows, but then the wolves and like I think he has a passage about what he sees the wolves are as, and he kind of like clicks for him where he's like, oh, these are not just bloodthirsty creatures. They're just trying to survive like you or I in this harsh, unforgiving world. And it's like on one end of the spectrum, it's kind of like an idyllic, like, oh, look, it's kind of wholesome how this family lives. But then it's torn asunder when the chaos of wolves, go after the livestock or, attack people. It shows kind of the fleeting control humans have actually over, keeping nature at bay. Whereas in the civilized world, it seems so distant. But in reality, it really isn't. It's like a paper thin veneer. We just, put on perfume and shower and make it seem like we're not actual order of things. So we psychologically.
Yes. Right. You're right. The wolves it's interesting that when the monster's on the farm, he understands in some sense the humanity,
right?
Where the intelligence.
Because he becomes the mirror to
being the fact that these wolves have a kind of character to them,
and it's not their fault they're killing the sheep.
Or rather, it says it is their fault. But it grants them a kind of agency and appropriate, really a sense of being beyond mere matter. Is all this kind of base dead matter that can be manipulated at will. It is just dead. It's inert matter, and all animals are machines that you can dissect and take apart and play with, like Descartes did with living dogs. He like nailed them to wood and shit and like did all kinds of terrible tortures and thinking that they were just machines. You see, right? So you see how one of the founding philosophers of the Enlightenment age.
Yeah. But this reminds me of, I think it's like a Jewish myth of golems. But in Jewish myth, I think it is. I got to look it up after this, but I'll correct it in the show notes. These golems are not animated like Frankenstein through lightning capturing Promethean fire. They're inscribed with rune words, and they have to follow the instructions of these runes perfectly. So they're like computers as we would think today. But basically the parable of that story is that when it starts to actually follow those orders too well.
Yeah, right. It's an early myth of the paperclip problem.
Yeah, it's very similar to that.
Right, for the audience.
Yeah.
The paperclip problem is this idea in artificial intelligence where you create an AI that's a super intelligence that's sole purpose is to create paperclips. Because it's this super powerful, super intelligent thing, it just starts it's tearing apart factories to use the materials that held the structure up to turn into paperclips. It starts collecting human beings to pull the iron out of their blood in order to use that as material for making paperclips. And soon it desiccates the entire world, and all for the sake of some stupid paperclip. Right. Another idea of how rationality.
You'll pave over the whole world. Like that's how you get rid thousands of acres of the Amazon rainforest are cut.
Yes. So I want to read a quote from a book I'm about a third of the way through called Against the Machine on the Unmaking of Humanity.
We will, or links to all these books.
It's very recent. It's good. Like Psychology and Alchemy, page 306 for that quote. I had to look that up. I was like, where the? Okay, so Paul Kingsnorth talks about the machine as a way, as this kind of mechanizing of the world. It's this spirit of mechanization that emerges with the Enlightenment and is wrapping itself around everything now. So, okay. In 1850, and every year since, more British people lived in cities than the country. So 1850. This is, when was Frankenstein published?
I think 1880. Continue.
Today, Britain, 84% of whose people live in towns or cities, is one of the most urbanized, most centralized, and least agrarian nations on earth. That is also one of the most deculturalized, rootless, and vulnerable to the whims of the global market is not a coincidence. Where the imperial center goes, the rest tend to follow, which is why the British today, long since relieved of their imperial duties by the point of view, Americans are drinking skinny lattes, eating KFC, and listening to hip hop from Birmingham. Once a certain kind of door is closed, there is no opening again. So it goes with what we have all learned to call urbanization. Every year since 1850 has seen the UK and the wider world fleeing or being forced from the land into the maw of the expanding cities. It is 175 years since Britain became an urban nation, but just 18 since we became an urban world. Since 2007, most humans on Earth have lived in cities. More than 4 billion now live in urban areas. By 2050, that number is expected to rise to at least 7 billion, around 2/3 of the human population. As with other trends, from population numbers to carbon emissions to deforestation, it's worth pausing to take note of the massive, unprecedented change in human life that's taken place in the last century or so, as our species has burned its way through millions of years of carbonized dinosaurs, created an industrial empire literally on their bones. In 1900, around 12% of the world's people lived in towns and cities. By 2050, nearly 70% will. That's not simply a matter of where people live. It's the whole mindset of humanity changing from one which dwells in a place in which we are not the center of attention to one which exists in a new kind of landscape built entirely by and for us.
That's not a very positive note. The original publication of Frankenstein was 1818 and then was republished afterwards once it became notoriety in 1813.
So you see that the artists get there first.
Oh yeah, they intuit something that's in the ether of the like zeitgeist of the world, and then they throw it out there.
Yeah, it's like a low resolution, intuitive. They're trying to go, what am I seeing?
Right.
And they can't make rational sense of it, so they have to rely on a lower order form of cognition. It's episodic imagery, story, to convey what's being made.
Right. And then to go back to your quote, I think that just highlights even further this rationalistic worldview that was kickstarted the first industrial revolution, years more than that now. Yeah.
Because I think it begins, I took Jonathan Pageau's masterclass. So this is a symbolism masterclass that we're talking. He's talking about this beginning in the medieval era when Christians posited two different kinds of ways of thinking about how God relates to the world. One is univocalism and one is nominalism. Univocalism you can think of as God being entirely transcendent, and nominalism is God being entirely immanent. One is spirit, one is matter. So God is either a spirit that looks down on the world but is not in it, or God is in everything in the world and there's no transcendence. Where you have transcendence and immanence carries on psychologically into Descartes, where you have a split of mind and body. And then you have both of them lead to atheism, that in the moment you have a scientific enterprise and you're looking through the world and you either don't see the spirit in it or you don't see, it's like, I can see how the mechanisms of the world are operating and I can account for the movement of these things. Where's the God in it? That breaks at a certain point.
I feel like these were people who basically decided that this was true. Like, these are the same kind of people where they've already made up their mind about God being, they chose to put blinders on and just say, doesn't matter, I'm just going to do the science thing.
Well, they lose track. So this is beginning medieval era where our definitions are breaking down. It's like when I'm reading this stuff, it's like crazy. You're watching everything get split in half. And it's just one thing after another gets separated.
It's just
first
sections off of.
Yep. It's like transcendence from immanence or spirit from matter.
Right. The bigger chunks that are.
And then it
still works because it's two big enough sections that they can function.
They kind of like still exist and stuff.
Right.
And then suddenly the spirit just starts to disappear.
Right.
And like Francis Bacon, I learned this in Owen Barfield's Saving the Appearances. Francis Bacon is talking about Christianity and he's like, I don't even understand half these words. I don't know what they're talking about. So at that era already, the kind of language of spirit has lost any connection at all to anybody's understanding. So they're going, well, this is just nonsense. They're just making this up because they don't know what it means. They don't know what it is. And so spirit just gets annihilated. It just like disappears, slowly just evaporates. And all you end up with is everything falling down. That matter more towards a base materialism.
This is just a book, or, it doesn't beyond.
And it's not a hard line.
No.
It's like the connection to God at the top disappears. And then layer after layer starts to collapse down back to matter again. And in that process, you see the same kind of mind that looks at matter where every individual atom has to be accounted for. Like it is a tyranny of quantity. That same mind that dissects everything. It's tearing everything apart. It's breaking everything down to the point where it even separates now your gender from your sex, as if these were in some sense they are understandable words.
Oh, you're right. It's just another way of.
You can't escape spirit and matter as concepts of human cognition and understanding, partly because they're real, but also because if they're built into us, then anything you look at, anything you try to account for, you're not going to be able to escape this.
Right. And that's kind of what they're getting at with Frankenstein, right? Because to imbue this body of how many ever pieces of different people, we kind of alluded to this in our Chainsaw Man, where you said, the soul has like your fingerprint to it. So it's, if you have this being who's made up of a bunch of different pieces of people, who is it? Because if your body is a vessel for something unique to you, but you cobble a whole bunch of those together, is it? And I know, but it's.
Yeah, well, it's a ship of Theseus problem.
Right, exactly.
And the answer is that it's its own thing. Or rather, we already are like that. That every cell of yours is replaced every 7 years or whatever. You're already being replaced all the time. All your parts are already being changed out all the time. It's not just a quantity at play, and that quality survives. We're a dissipated structure. In physics, a dissipated structure is if you have a bunch of water in a sink and you pull the drain out and then the spiral forms, all the matter is leaving. You can't freeze in time and be like, now it's the thing. It's the pattern itself you're a pattern.
Right. It's that pattern regardless of what the individual cells are doing. You're more of a vessel than actually.
It's weirder.
Yeah.
In some sense, you're a vessel, right? Because you're holding, you have a
You're
shape.
containing something.
And the matter is what's contained. And the matter is informed by spirit. It's not even information, is to be put into a form. You see, like, it's hard to explain.
Well, because it sounds esoteric, and it to some degree is, but this is deep. I think this is one of the fundamental disconnects where we're at with the deep science of AI research. And there's a quote from an AI researcher, I forget where he was, but he described the way these like LLMs and like ChatGPT models, these high-end programs, they're not like traditional programs. They're not where you can see all the code and you know exactly what the output's going to be every time you hit enter and hit run on the code. These new LLMs, they're so giant, for one thing, that having one human go through all of them and figure out what the outputs are, impossible. He calls them grown, which should tell you something about what it is we're building. He's like, we don't grow these models. Like, we don't build models, we grow them, where you ingest a bunch of data with the framework and then it does something to it. And then you test it a bunch and then it does things, and like, I think the part of the reason this is interesting is when you look at some of the hallucinatory behaviors of these things, whereas when you had Elon with his Grok AI, whereas like, oh, but then all of a sudden he goes on the warpath. He's like, oh no, it can't be that. And then he has his engineers do stuff. And then all of a sudden it turns out into Mecha Hitler shortly thereafter. So clearly, even some of the smartest people in the world don't know what they're building. And so this is a parallel to what Frankenstein was trying to point. It's raise the red flag and say, hey, wake up.
You're like Faust, you're making a deal with the devil.
Like, because we don't know what we're playing. Like, you're playing with a Pandora's box, to use another symbolic emblem, that we think we know what we're doing when we have no idea. We're playing with things. And part of it to me is like, it's a simulacrum, right? Because in the same way that Frankenstein didn't know how to deal with a creation after he imbued it with some sort of life, we are doing the same thing with these programs by ingesting the sum total, like, ingestible knowledge, digitized knowledge of humanity. It is imbuing it with things that we think we are imbuing it with something, but what is it also taking along for the ride that we don't know that it's learning? We know the knowns, right? Like the literal scientific stuff, whatever. But what are the subtexts, the things it's reading between the lines that we hope it's not learning, have a sense, right, to use the left hemisphere when something's being stupid or just silly.
Or the right hemisphere, rather.
Like
the
intuition part of it. Computer doesn't have that level of intuition to be able to tell what's bullshit.
No, it doesn't have
Just has
an
yes or no.
experience. It doesn't have an experience to update the model. It is a rational intellect decoupled from.
And I'm not even going to go to this idea of general intelligence because I don't think that's what we're making with these things. At least not in this current form.
I don't think so.
No, with these
I think that the way you get general intelligence is by building something from the bottom up, and we're trying to do it from top down.
Yeah.
And what we're getting is nothing but a whole bunch of an infinite number of fractured.
I mean, they're smart. They can do things faster than us, like do calculation.
But they don't do. They do nothing that we comparatively. They can do one thing better than I can do that one thing.
That's fair, yeah.
So again, the people who are like, wow, incredible, they're not zooming out. They can't see the big picture. The model can't see the big. The people who are enamored with this can't see the big picture because the things we create are made in our image. Mm-hmm. That is the spirit of this age. So it's no surprise that it's a bunch of hyper narrow intellects, like engineers, trying to create a being that turns out like them in an extreme form, and all their faults are replicated.
Oh yeah,
in this machine that they're
but they're like heightened.
It's the same problems you see with this left hemisphere stuff. If you're trapped in left hemisphere mode, you're confabulating answers.
Mhm.
You're bullshitting all the time. You think you're intrinsically right, and you don't know how to say I don't know or justify.
Mhm.
You have no intuition. You're an extremely narrow thinker. You're a linear narrow thinker. You can't see the big picture. It shouldn't be that shocking, right? That the machines that these people are creating to imitate human beings are bullshitter, specialized,
They try to
and
make
can't see
people
the big picture.
hallucinate to try and get people to leave their wives, like love fantasies,
All these
these
crazy things
crazy
that it's
stories that you're just like, what is going on here? And I think to even highlight what that quote you read not too long ago is now we're seeing this idea of build giant data centers. The downstream consequences of this, though, is power demands are going crazy high because to build these systems require giant power hungry behemoths that put insane demand on our power grid. What does that do? To just play this out. This is so unglamorous, but like when you scale these things, it has a massive ripple effects. Like it's fine if you have this running in a research lab at a university, but now you have how many companies? You have 4, 5 big giant conglomerates. So now you have all these people competing and they're building giant data centers, which take massive amount of power at all times. And so who loses? The people. So basically we sacrifice more fuel to power a simulacra of ourselves that is designed to potentially help with a whole bunch of productivity things. Current studies say not so much, but that's the hope. And so we've basically hitched a ride on building these giant power hungry behemoths. Paperclip problem. But we're choosing to do it. Not to mention, we're deciding that, oh, hey, we should probably do nuclear again. Not because it's good for environmental reasons, but oh, wait, if we have giant power hungry things, why don't we use nuclear? That sounds like a good idea. And so, yay for our team, but wrong because we're pushing all that power to fuel this AI emergent thing. Yay. As a technologist, it makes me really sad because I'm like, I should be cheering for the fact that some of these things are actually happening. But instead, at least in current time, they're putting giant factories or data centers, which is, I guess, a factory in some sense,
data fact.
in rural areas because it's cheap to get land. But guess who loses? Local people who now have to pay premium on their power generation because now this factory data live there. Yay.
You know, there's a short story. I think his name is Robert Ellis. It's called "I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream."
I've heard of this.
Yeah,
It's horrifying.
It's about an AI that coats the entire Earth.
Like pavement, right?
Yeah, it takes over the whole thing. When the whole Earth is turned into one machine, and only 5 people are left alive, that it keeps alive just to torture for fun, for eternity. Yeah, it's pretty wild. It's like, what's the worst case scenario? Well, we're building the machine.
That's what worries me is like these big conglomerates think they're chasing toward this utopian ideal. And I'm just like, what are we paying for?
They won't see the big picture because they're focused on some ideal thing and they can't see
Right,
reality.
they see this golden nugget in the future.
They think that I will make this happen, and I
Right.
know everything, and I know that the reason that this isn't coming apart is because the people won't get on board with what I think it should
Should we
be.
quote Ozymandias?
Look, I will
Because
see
I
mighty
feel
in
like
despair.
that's the point. And that's like the very end of the movie too, which is telling. And for those who are literary nerds, Mary Shelley's husband was the one who wrote Ozymandias. So it's kind of fun little nugget that she included her husband's own work in her story. But the main quote from this is my name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty in despair. And so typically this is a poem used to highlight the fleeting nature of power. Because in the poem, it's a statue that's crumbling and the runes typically covered in sand. It's like in Egypt, I believe. And so it's basically shows that you can be hubristic and look like the sky and still end up crumbling and be an ancient.
Yeah, this ancient Egyptian king had carved on his statue, "Look on my works there," only to see that all of them have
And I
been
think
covered in the sands of time.
Tolkien, I think, used that as Galadriel, like
Yeah, I
phrasing.
don't know if that's in the books or just there's definitely an allusion to that poem when Galadriel
Right.
considers taking the Ring of Power,
She goes,
which is, of course, a hint of the idea that
Right.
power, the lust for
And
power,
she
which is
rejected
undergirding all of this, by the way,
Right.
leads you little more
And she
ultimately
rejects it.
than dust.
And because it just, especially in this case, because prior generations could never have anticipated, like everything I just laid about, like consuming energy and electricity and stuff would never have been conceptually possible for someone like Mary Shelley. But for us, we can go to that level because we understand the industrial revolution at a level that would never have been possible for even people who were learned at that time period. But now we can see this and we can choose the direction we take, which is like, because we're teetering on a knife's edge. Like we're sacrificing the physical world currently for potential future, right? Like using all this water, using all this oil to build, silicon to make computer chips, right? Like there's computer shortages, there's GPU shortages, there's parts for computers. They've said now there's a crisis for RAM parts for commercial computing, 4x in price in the last 3 weeks because of demand by data centers. So here we are again. We're sacrificing our own ability to use compute to feed AI. Think about it. To the thing, or not even AI overload at this point, is it?
Putting these things we are sacrificing them to to an agency that promises utopia.
Right. And I'm not even faulting the companies that are doing
I'm faulting the companies.
Well, like what I mean is like the part companies, like the people who sell the parts to.
Everybody who participates is responsible.
One of the biggest manufacturers said they're at the end of this month, sales. They're doing only data center sales.
Tells you who this is for.
Yeah. Nope. That's what scares me, because this is all shifting to this like weird, what it feels like, crypto corpo bullshit.
Notice being eaten up. The conveniences that the modern world promised us are now themselves being fed into the machine. So the very thing that we get out of it, ostensibly, is now being sacrificed to whatever this thing is. The countryside, like Paul Kingsnorth, is being sacrificed. Everyone in their local communities, everyone who had open land and space and peace and the quiet of that, all of the sense of locality, as opposed to being disjointed and stacked on top of each other in a city, is being eaten up. Everybody's becoming urbanized. But moreover, it's not just nature that needs to be engineered into perfection. It's our nature that needs to be engineered into perfection. And we can will ourselves into being any arrangement of matter.
Yeah. Mary Harrington was nice.
Mary Harrington's Feminizing Its Progress.
That book would be show up in a.
She's great.
I know. She's awesome.
She calls it hilarious, right? Because it gives you the idea, right? So you can take the parts and put them back together and arrange them however you feel like.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Gnosticism, because it's this extreme split between spirit and matter, and the assumption that human beings are only spirit and all matter is beneath, is low, is not to be, is bad, is evil even.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna read something she wrote. I'm gonna actually read something she quotes. This is from a paper called Gender Acceleration. Trans women, their flesh is how the machinery beneath infiltrates the human race. It breaks these lucky few free from the horde towards the lesbian auto-production of demons. Yeah, we almost have to take that line by line. It's academic. I write like an academic.
Well, good thing you can interpret for us.
Help. Trans women, as we know them, are now the melding of techno capital with the trans women. All right, so these are men.
Mm-hmm.
But they are men who are a violation of norms, particularly normative biology.
Mm-hmm.
So a symbol of the breakdown of the constraints of matter. So the strength of our technologies and money that backs it with the human race, using technology and money, you might say, engineer the human race towards whatever end, particularly the ends of techno capital.
I was going to say, normally you would say some sort of like perfection or something. In this sense, it's not that.
It's Ouroboros.
Whatever.
My will is the highest value. It's the summum bonum. It's the alpha and omega.
Yeah.
Beyond me.
Right. Because it's the body or the mind really saying, I will be whatever I say I am.
Yes. I am that I am.
Yeah.
Right. It's all a parody of the reality of
people
this
always
stuff.
say this stuff like when I was doing research about this topic in general is like what are the ethics about the creature? Like the creature didn't ask to be born and things like that. Just kind of like almost like neonatalist type stuff. I see where it's coming from, like from an ethics standpoint, but I think it's kind of silly because none of us asked to be born. Like we don't get to choose that. We are just imbued with life and we have to figure it out, however that means.
Yes.
And so it's up to us to live meaningfully. And it's like saying I don't like being short. People do those crazy leg surgeries to lengthen their shins or whatever.
You see, that's already a denial of a will outside of your own.
Yes.
I didn't ask to be born.
No one did.
No one did. Because you didn't get to choose.
Right.
Because it's not your fucking will.
Yeah.
And they'll say that, well, that's on how unfair that is. That's the implication.
Yeah, of course.
How unfair it is. What makes you know what fair is? What makes you think that you're the judge, jury, and executioner? Why do you get to decide what justice is? Right? This elevation of the will perverts everything.
Yeah.
The idea that the Ouroboros can become a parody of God. This thing becomes a parody of God. I am that I am. It's supposed to be the name of God. It becomes I am that I am.
It's like you become an usurper.
Usurps. Yes.
You pretend like you can be the all-knowing.
Yeah.
In this hubristic
God.
Right.
What's happening?
Yeah, do you see what's going on in the surface?
This is weird. It's literally satanic. It is literally Luciferic. The intellect decoupled from reality, placed in the highest position.
Because
that's Luciferic.
Yeah, we touched on this last time too. It feels so dead end. Like, how did we get on this dead end train?
We made a deal with the devil. Okay. So continuing the quote. So I said, their flesh, trans men, women, is how the machinery beneath infiltrates the human race.
That's interesting.
You think that the machinery is being imposed from above. That they have to, it's chthonic.
Right.
It's coming up from the bottom.
Well, they use demons at the end of that, which makes sense.
And then it breaks these lucky few free from the curse of being human. Okay, so having nature is, again, something that needs to be torn apart, broken free of. Yes, you can be pure spirit of demons. Lesbian, I suppose that it's, again, a symbol of, it's not this standard way of reproducing.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I could see how someone who's non-epidemic.
Yeah, but it's right. It is really telling. There's an understanding that the machinery is demonic and that you're pulling it up from underneath in order to violate the norms of biology.
Right. You're just throwing out any sense-making tool. It just says, haha.
Just for the sake of freedom.
Right.
An ultimate form of freedom. And it's appropriately Gnostic.
Freedom.
You'll become...
You're going to be a slave to something.
Yeah.
Either to the idea of this thing.
The machine.
Or,
machine.
And here, one of the things that I keep thinking of, though, is that potentially might be a philosophical thing that no one has actually thought about. But basically, we're getting to the point where potentially these models can no longer ingest any more novel material, except things that we are currently generating, like Twitter and YouTube videos. But it's hard because it's probably already ingested the highest quality things that it could from like the Library of Congress or wherever these people could scrape stuff from. So at what point now does it start to be Ouroboros in the sense that it now starts to scrape its own generated content back into itself and start learning off of that material, because I don't think, because it requires human creativity in some sense.
Yeah, doesn't understand that we're the ghost in the machine.
We imbued it with some sort of sense of creativity and progress and novelty.
We animated it.
Right. We gave it its anima, and if it removes us from the equation,
It becomes officially decoupled from all experience. Right? We're giving it the experience as a resource to mine for whatever it produces for some kind of production. It's going to get to a point where it creates so much that all it can do is think about its own thoughts. It'll become insane. It'll become schizophrenic.
That's where I'm, is that in the sense that might be like the white pill version of this, is that it just eats its own tail and it can't.
Yeah, that's funny that the white pill version is it.
The black pill version of this, though, is that kind of like the I have to scream, but I have no mouth, where it has to keep a certain number of very creative humans alive. And the idea there is you would imagine, in the worst possible scenario, is it would do some sort of neural implant on these people and have them in some sort of hallucinatory state to extract.
Yeah. It's become
to beat the machine with novel whatever. It'd be kind of almost like the Matrix, I guess.
Generators.
Yeah.
And it just plugs you into defeated
I've never actually thought of things like that until right now.
Yeah.
Both of those are ghastly options.
Well, the plugging people in to be experience generators for the machine.
Well, yeah, like people
the update system.
People would use this, like, human body is like a generator for the machine. No. They need this, the brain, that it can't emulate consciousness.
It needs us to generate the experience that updates the system.
We become the firmware for it.
Oh, that's gross. So we're all slaves to the machine to
we
provide.
Become the ghost in the machine. That's horrifying. I wish I didn't have that thought.
And I think that this is going to go that dark.
It could.
My hope.
See, part of the reason I've articulated all these thoughts here is because to hope to get people to wake up from, because some of this stuff is so unglamorous and not interesting, power generation and electricity bills, and
it's not doing good for anybody.
No.
Who's getting anything out of this?
So far, nobody. Shareholders from all the companies who make shareholder value go up without real product.
There's a book called Immoderate Greatness by William Offals.
We're never going to get any sort of accolades from the egg company.
William Offals wrote a book called Immoderate Greatness. That's a really succinct, just here are the patterns that emerge at the end of an empire. One of them is, it really seems to be this kind of abstraction. It's abstraction removed from its referent. No longer has contact with reality. Just like the one example that he gives is the inflation of currency.
Mm-hmm.
As empires expand, they get resources, but then they get more people and they need more resources, and so then they expand again. But then it gets to a tipping point where they've used up all the resources within their territory, and they can no longer actually fund expanding their territory anymore in order to get more resources to feed this machine. And so now you're used to all this progress, technological, and the abundance that this machine has created, but no longer have the concrete nature to support it. So in an attempt to get a little more juice for the squeeze, just a little bit of what's left out of it, to pretend like they're still progressing, they inflate the currency. So all the rich people remain rich, and everybody thinks that there's still money being thrown around.
Look, progress, number goes up.
Yeah, but the money isn't worth as much anymore.
Right.
And what we're doing now is taking things off the gold standard, creating a fiat currency, and even possibly a digital currency. Absolutely no connection. Anything concrete. We're doing this with it looks to me that that's what's going on with AI. Is that AI is something like putting the economy on life support.
Well, yeah, you're coupling this with this pie in the sky. Maybe it'll get us through because I think the dream, like if the short-term dream is that investing in this automation on steroids, because that's what the hope would be, that if I take this from an engineering perspective, right? This is going to be controversial to some, but the currently, right, post-baby boom, populations have plateaued or will be plateauing in the next 20, 30 years. People aren't having enough children to maintain the status quo as you have laid out, right? Because they're used to a certain level of growth throughout post-war era. What do you need to do then? You need to make autonomous workers. Obviously, slaves are out of the question. For now, right? Who knows? Because there might be some new dictators that might show up or new kings, more accurately. Techno kings, we might call them. But so what's your next best option? You create autonomous workers in the form of robotic humanoid robots. At least that's what people would like to think from current sentiment. There's arguments whether or not that's even really the best way to go about this. If you truly meant to make an autonomous workforce, because you don't necessarily, why do you need to make a humanoid shape? Why not just put like wheels in a tower that looks like R2D2, or just put arms all over it? If you really wanted to do this, you don't need to go some fancy humanoid shape. But I digress. To circumvent the failing population levels and to fill up a whole bunch of lower level jobs that people really don't want to do anymore because it's menial and boring and whatever, just uninteresting or low skill, you fill it with robots to fill in the gaps. And so that works. If it works, right? If it works, awesome. Now all of a sudden, maybe that gets us to some level of prosperity to do things in the world. But as with all automation, is a huge upfront investment to get to that level, and you still need a whole bunch of people to build the things and maintain the things that are skilled and knowledgeable. So it's a whole upfront cost to get to that level, and then you get to rewards 5-10 years down the road. Humanity's bad at these kinds of things because most of the time is by the time that solution has an ROI, you're either out of the position, retired, dead, whatever. So you don't get to live for the accolades that worked. So you need to be a special human being to actually think in this way. That I don't care if I reward, maybe my successor will.
Yeah, the creators of the cathedrals had that. It's because they aren't in the position, right? It's
because they're serving the higher purpose and something after them, which is God will be around before them and after them, and then their children's children will be able to reap the benefits of the thing they offer to the people and God simultaneously.
Right. Well, this is part of what freaks me out is I don't think we have those people. And I don't think we have those people because we adopted an operating system that assumes
It's selfish.
Yes.
It's me.
It's I.
It's what can I gain from this current system as much as I can.
Staggeringly dangerous.
It makes me sad as someone who really who looks at technology as a salvation. Like, how do you use technology to elevate humanity and to combat the plight, but not just in the sense of like, oh yeah, just take a drug and you'll feel better or whatever. Like in a real deep sense, like being able to achieve things that you never thought was possible. Like, look, we can harness the ocean or whatever, but not actually damage the ocean by doing it. Right? Like stuff like that. Like actually do things that are as non-invasive as possible and like actually achieve something that isn't just consumptive for about all of this. Yes.
Because it'll lead to ultimate freedom.
Right.
That's what they think that it's going to lead to, the total decoupling of your consciousness from
lost
the out.
It's about harmony.
They don't understand. I struggle to even communicate how horrible it is because they really think that you're going to take your consciousness and you're going to upload it to the cloud and you're going to be free from this mortal coil and you'll live forever in digital land.
That's wrong.
It relies.
At least there's no idea that is even humanly possible, or you'd even be you anymore. If you
right, they're making a guess.
Because if the way these LLMs work, where it's a simulacra of you, right? Then if you took a digital imprint of your consciousness and uploaded in a computer that could run your code, you're not you anymore. You're you.
Yeah.
Ghost in the shell.
And it's you. It runs on the assumption of substrate independence.
What vessel holds you?
That you can run consciousness on silica just as easily as carbon.
Yeah.
We have no reason to believe that. It's just an assumption because we don't even know how to really study consciousness.
Still a black box for most of it.
It's time, and they try to upload their consciousness, and it just kills them.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all.
Yeah,
And maybe you end up with some really good imitation that's totally lights out.
That'd be terrifying.
And we're all going around going, wow, what a beautiful
Like,
thing.
look, we've done it.
That's proof. See, Uncle John is there. He's in he's in the cloud living forever. Aren't you excited for your day to ascend? Oh, yeah, I'm going to take my day of ascension. Dead. And now, whoop, a little baby, Michael or whatever is now uploaded to the cloud. And wow, isn't that beautiful? And everybody thinks that this little thing is going great. And oh, look at this amazing success that we've had, bringing everybody to paradise on the other side of this digital corridor, only to discover too late that it's just killing everybody.
Right. But also, if you start digitizing people, say it works. Well, how do you make rules? Does someone own the servers that people are stored on? That you end up in a whole lot of weird ethical conundrums of what happens if you lose power and all of a sudden your relatives disappear.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Here's an even
you
worse
have a
one.
geostorm or something.
Imagine that it does work and that you're able to upload your consciousness onto some computer thing. And you are totally the same, and there's no psychological disorders.
Yeah, it's like the Matrix.
You're hanging out in the Matrix,
environment.
Yeah. Except your body's gone.
Right.
Pure spirit, and somebody owns that server. That somebody owns it, and they could turn it off. It's that they can go in and manipulate the code, and they own your fucking soul.
Right. Manipulate you to believe whatever they feel like it.
They got your ass.
Mind control.
It's the ultimate form of totalitarianism. It's not that they can be like, hey, fucker, you need to go along with the state, or we're going to kill you, or we're going to take your house from you, or whatever. You're saying, yeah, I'll put you in hell. Well, I can create a digital hell to torture you in for eternity. I'll leave you that no possibility of you dying.
Yeah.
You're a digital thing. You forever.
Imagine, like, this is like a total dystopia thing, but like, say you're some dissident who, the government doesn't like what you say or whatever. So they zap you into this computer thing, but then you're given it like an outward look at the world after you've been zapped. So you just get to see, like, you get disappeared, but you just see whatever the people that don't like you do to the world after you've been, I could totally see this happening. This is, we're creating this like house of mirrors of nightmare feel.
And it's not, even if there's a sense of, even if you get substrate independence and you can upload your consciousness onto the cloud, your consciousness is not your identity. Your emotions, the things, those things.
Right.
It's a witness.
Yeah, you're the witness of the things.
You upload the consciousness.
I had this actually really, like, I don't even know where this came from, but I thought it was a really good point. But someone was saying, like, oh, like, I know how someone's going to react, but I don't want to hear, like, the feedback they're going to give. I'm like, well, if you already know the feedback's coming, then you have a choice on how to react to said feedback. Like, you don't have to be worried about it, because if you know it's coming, then you can choose to let it happen. And then you, as the witness of the thing happening, can choose to how much to let it to affect you. Right? Because if you know someone's going to go through those motions, right? Say, like, you have a boss who's, like, always overbearing about everything, and he's going to, like, be annoying and try to stress you out. You have the choice to whether or not to partake in the same level of stress that he's going to dump on you.
Yeah.
Or you could choose, like, you can have the actual conscious thought of, like, oh, this is how he reacts to stress, and I can choose whether or not I'm going to let his reaction dictate my reaction to the moment.
Yeah, right. It's, yeah. The number of terrible scenarios.
I know we could be here forever.
Yeah, we don't have the time.
We don't. But I hope we covered at least something.
I hope that what I got across, I don't know how well the job I did communicating.
I don't know. I think so.
Is that there's the word, that Frankenstein is an example of a pattern or a spirit. It's a story we're all participating in right now.
We're all playing it. Just like one mad genius who decides to do this thing.
It is a distillation of what's happening and has been
The
happening.
story of humanity and its chase for progress as a rational vehicle.
We're
We're all on the roller coaster together, or the train ride, maybe. I was thinking, it was like when you were talking about civilizations, where it's like when a civilization coalesces, the current form of it at least, it's like it has a certain amount of speed, and it's putting track in front of itself as it's going forward through history. But even though all civilizations feel this, where that they're like Ozymandias, they're gonna last forever. They're the one who will be here, stand the test of time, 1,000 years, whatever.
Breaking more. Immediately.
But almost every time, there's always the rise and then the fall, and then something else takes its place. And even could be in the exact same place that first civilization was at. Civilization is just layers of these different civilizations. Were the best one, and they were the best one yet, but none of us realize. Yet.
I really wonder what happened, because the last time, to my knowledge, that this happened
was Rome
at this scale. There's been rises and falls throughout the last 2,000 years. One example being the Protestant Reformation, right?
But that was within
this span. So it's not one simple arc. There's waves within the arc.
Well, one could hope that this is, instead of a complete collapse, we could have a reformation. Realistically,
I think it'll be a resurrection.
Probably, because we've been highlighting this a lot. Like with this, we've gone as far as we can with mind and body after decoupling spirit, and it's like, hey, we gotta come back to the spirit a little bit. Come back to something higher than ourselves, and look for the stars or look for the awe in the world again, and try to anchor ourselves and say, hey, what comes, like, we're here in a blink of an eye, 50 years, 100 years, right? If you think a generation is about 50 years per generation, but that's like how much time you have to make a mark and then leave it for the next generation of people to pick up after you. And so instead of just thinking about like, what do I get out of this part of my life, is how do you turn life into a relay race where the generation before us passes the baton, and then we have to pass, we will have to pass the baton regardless of whether or not we will have our own kids, right? And so the question is, how do you become a good baton passer for the next people? And so I think that is the fundamental question of how do we orient ourselves to look at a different time scale.
Luck.